Welcome to Nocturnal Echoes. I'm your host, Bastion Crow. Tonight, I've gathered three chilling tales from the shadowed corners of the unexplained. First, on a desolate stretch of highway, a lone driver comes across a mysterious hitchhiker and soon discovers that some passengers never truly leave. Next, three brothers head into the desert for an evening of target shooting, but as night falls, they realize the emptiness of the desert hides more than silence. And finally, our monthly special, pulled from a journal nearly forgotten by time, the account of a gravekeeper tending to a cemetery in the late 1800s, where safety coffins were meant to protect the living from being buried too soon, but not everything inside those graves remained still. So, settle into your favorite spot, let the night surround you, and prepare yourself. Nocturnal Echoes begins.
I was too tired to be on the road, the kind of tired that makes your vision blur, even when your eyes are open. But I was close, 40-something miles from home. I just wanted to sleep in my own bed. The highway was quiet, empty, the kind of quiet that makes your car feel too loud. I glanced at my phone. It was 9:50 p.m. The battery was low, but I remember the time. Just a few minutes later, everything changed. She stepped into the headlights, a woman in white. I slammed the brakes. The tires screamed as the car skidded. The wheel jumped in my hands. There was a sound, not a thud, more like something soft against the bumper. Then nothing. I sat still, breathing, waiting. But there was no movement. I got out and called into the dark. "Are you all right?" I looked along the shoulder, down into the ditch toward the trees. No sign of anyone. Then I heard her, weeping, faint, far away, somewhere beyond the trees. I moved toward it, through the brush, slipped once in the grass. I thought she was injured. Maybe I'd hit her. Maybe she was lying somewhere trying to call out. The weeping grew louder. I kept going. Then it stopped. Everything went still. And then, behind me, I heard it again. The weeping. But now it came from the direction of my car. I turned and ran. As I came out of the trees, I saw someone sitting in the passenger seat, a pale figure, facing the windshield. I ran to the car and opened the door. The seat was empty. No sound, no movement, just the hum of the engine. I looked at the dash. The time said 11:44 p.m. That didn't make sense. I checked my phone. It still said 9:58. I hadn't been gone 2 hours. It felt like 10 minutes. I reset the clock and started driving. The road stayed empty. Just headlights, white lines, and trees. Then the air changed. It got cold. Not cool. Cold. The kind of cold that sits on your skin. The AC was off. The vents were closed. The windows shut. But I could see my breath. I looked at the dash. 11:44. Again. I pulled over and reset the clock. The cold faded. No explanation. I kept driving. Minutes later, something brushed my hand. I was gripping the wheel, both hands steady, but something soft and cold slid across the back of my hand, up my forearm, light as fingertips, cold as ice. I jerked away and pulled over. I checked around the car. Nothing. When I got back in, 11:44. I reset it again. I didn't want to keep going, but I was in the middle of nowhere. The next town was 20 miles ahead, so I drove. This time I watched the dash. It read 10:58. I kept my eyes on it. Then it jumped, straight to 11:44, and the car shut off. Headlights, engine, power, everything died. I coasted to the shoulder, popped the hood, and checked what I could. Nothing seemed wrong. Back inside, I checked my phone. No signal. The air turned cold again. Slow at first, then deeper. I didn't wait. I started walking. The road was empty. No lights ahead. No traffic. Then I heard it again. Weeping. A woman. Somewhere ahead. Crying in the dark. I stopped. Do I go forward into the sound? Or back to the car, where the clock always says 11:44? I stood there, caught between the two. Then headlights cut through the trees. A truck pulled over. Old faded paint. The driver looked normal. Local, maybe. Late 50s. Wore a reflective vest. He asked if I was all right. I told him my car died. That was all. He didn't press. I got in. The heater was on. The radio played soft country. The dash said 11:53. That was the end of it. Or at least the last part I want to remember. I've never driven that highway at night again. And if I'm ever behind the wheel and the clock reads 11:44, I pull over and I wait. There's something uneasy about the desert at night. People think of it as quiet, empty, dead land stretching to the edge of the earth. But that's not true. It's alive in ways most don't understand. And sometimes it watches. It was supposed to be a simple day trip. Just 3 brothers, some rifles, and a cooler full of drinks. We wanted to get away from town, find a quiet spot, and shoot for a few hours before heading back. We drove deeper into the desert than usual. The dirt road gave up a long time before we stopped, the tires crunching over dry earth and scattered rock. Derek was driving. He always did. Being the oldest meant calling the shots. Lucas sat up front next to him, thumbing through a dead radio dial. I was wedged in the back seat with the gear. No one said much on the drive. The silence felt like part of the plan. We found a flat wash between some jagged hills, just as the sun started falling. It was a quiet stretch of land, open and dry. We set up some makeshift targets, cracked open a few drinks, and passed the rifles around. The echo from the shots carried far. It felt good, like the world was holding still just for us. By the time we packed up, the sun was gone and the desert was dark. That's when the truck refused to start. Derek turned the key, a slow, tired crank. Then nothing. He popped the hood and messed around for a bit. But it was clear. Something was dead. The alternator's shot, he finally muttered, shutting the hood. We checked our phones. Not a single bar. Lucas climbed a ridge behind us and held his phone high, but still nothing. We were too far in. The nearest paved road was probably 10 miles away, and walking it in the dark wasn't something we wanted to try. "We'll stay the night," Derek said. "Figure it out at first light." So that's what we did. We climbed into the cab, rolled down the windows just enough for air, and tried to get comfortable. The seats were stiff and none of us could stretch out, but we figured it was better than hiking blind through the desert. It was around midnight when I first heard it. A giggle, distant, faint, but clearly a child's laugh. I sat up and looked out the window. "Did you hear that?" Lucas stirred and nodded. Sounded like a kid. "There's no damn kids out here," Derek muttered. He leaned forward and flipped on the headlights. The beams cut across the desert, white and sharp, flooding the stretch of sand in front of us. We looked out through the windshield. There were no children, but there were things moving. A few tarantulas skittered across the gravel, big enough to notice even at a distance. A snake, thick and slow, slithered along a flat rock. Scorpions moved in and out of crevices. Not hundreds, but enough to make your skin crawl. Enough to know no one should be walking around out there, especially not kids. We watched for a while. Nothing changed. Eventually, Derek turned the lights off. A few minutes passed. The truck was silent again. Then we heard it. More laughter. Louder this time. More voices. Running feet. The kind of chaotic joy you only hear when kids are playing. We didn't say a word, just listened. Then came the sound of footsteps, light and quick, gravel shifting under small feet. And then a tap, gentle, tap-tap, right on the passenger side window. Derek turned the headlights back on. The desert lit up again. No children, no footprints, just the slow, unsettling crawl of desert life. Spiders, lizards, a few snakes. He left the lights on this time. We stared out into the dark for a long while, waiting for something to show itself. Nothing did. When he finally shut them off again, the silence didn't last. More laughter. Now close enough to hear the individual voices. A girl, 2 boys, maybe more. More footsteps. Then a soft knock, this time on the rear window. Another on the hood. We didn't move, didn't breathe too loud. Derek's hand hovered near his pistol, but none of us really thought about using it. The noises circled us, tiny hands tapping on metal, whispers, close enough to hear but never clear enough to understand. It went on like that for hours. Then, just before 4 in the morning, it stopped. Not gradually, not like kids running off, just silence, as if whatever had been out there simply vanished. The sky began to brighten. That cold, dusty gray that comes before sunrise started to wash over the desert. We stepped out of the truck slowly, unsure of what we'd see. The ground was still. No spiders, no snakes, no footprints, no sign that anything, or anyone, had been there at all. We packed our rifles and started walking east, back toward the main road. About 2 miles in, Lucas checked his phone. 1 bar, then 2. He called a friend of his back in town, told him where we were and what happened. The guy said he'd be there in under an hour. He picked us up near a dry ridge where the road began again. We climbed into the back of his truck. No one spoke much on the ride. When we reached the edge of town, Derek asked to be dropped off at a friend's place, the one who owned a tow truck. He wanted to get the truck out of there right away. Lucas and I went home. Derek headed back into the desert and came back with the truck later that day. We asked him if he'd seen or heard anything again, but Derek, as always, was short to dismiss the conversation and said that nothing happened. Later, I went outside and sat on the porch steps contemplating what we had experienced the night before. As the sun was getting ready to set, some marks on the truck caught my attention. I took a closer look, and there were small handprints, as if children had been pressing their dusty hands on the truck. Derek came up behind me and put his hand on my shoulder. He muttered quietly, "Just let it go, bro. Who would believe anything we have to say about last night?" I nodded slowly, still examining the prints. Then something rare happened. Derek perked up and said cheerfully, "Come on, help me wash this piece of junk. Pizza's on me if you help me out." I snapped out of my thoughts about last night and helped him wash the truck. To this day, we don't talk about what happened out there, and we never go that far into the desert anymore. When a death occurred in the late 1800s, it was customary to wait 3 days before burial. The body was laid out in the front room, the windows cracked no matter the season, and the mirrors turned to face the wall. It was said the soul would linger, confused for a time. Some waited for it to pass. Others waited in case it hadn't. For those with means and fear, there was another precaution. A length of twine, tied gently around the deceased's wrist, ran through a pipe embedded in the coffin lid and up to a small wooden frame above the grave. There, affixed to a rusted bracket, hung a modest iron bell. If the dead awoke, they could use the bell to signal for help. These were called safety graves, but most in town called them savior bells. And to ensure they did more than decorate the field, a man was hired to listen. His name was Elias Fenn, widower, no children. He lived in a narrow tilting shack just outside the iron gate and kept watch over the rows of stones. It was said he never drank, never left town, and never once slept a full night. He called himself the bellkeeper, though no one else did. Most just called him Elias. Some less kindly called him the Watcher, but all knew he took the work seriously. He kept records, maintained each line, walked the rows at dusk, checking the cords, testing the tension. It was a raw March evening when Miss Cora Whiteley, age 23, was buried. Daughter of a wealthy banker, she had succumbed to consumption, thin as paper, lips blue, chest barely rising when the doctor made the call. Her father, grief-stricken and firm in his superstitions, demanded every safeguard. A sealed coffin, a savior bell, and Elias's personal attention. The grave was dug before sunset beneath a patch of bare sky between two hawthorn trees. Elias stood by as the coffin was lowered. He tested the cord one final time. It responded. Taut, reliable. He watched through the first night. Nothing stirred. The second night, sometime near 2 a.m, Elias came out of a shallow sleep with a start. No sound had woken him, not one he could name, but his body knew something was wrong. He stepped outside, lantern in hand, and swept the graveyard with his eyes. Mist crawled low over the grass. The trees beyond stood in windless silence. Then he noticed one of the bells, an old one, long dormant, swaying gently on its bracket. It wasn't Miss Whiteley's. It was grave number 47, a headstone worn so smooth the name had disappeared with time. Elias hadn't logged a movement from that grave in years. He approached slowly. The cord attached to the post was trembling faintly, not with wind, but something more rhythmic, like it was responding to effort. A pulse. He knelt, put a hand near the pipe. The cold iron carried no vibration now, but he was certain of what he'd seen. He logged it anyway. The date, the time, the weather. Then returned to the shack, unease settling in beneath his ribs. The following night, just past the same hour, he heard it again. Not from the first grave, but this time from 2. He stepped into the night to find another bell moving. One was again swaying softly, grave 47, but now so was the one at Miss Whiteley's plot. The movement was slow, deliberate, like a pendulum disturbed by a human hand. It was not the wind. He would have staked his life on that. And in the case of Miss Whiteley, someone else's life may have already depended on it. He grabbed his lantern, his tools, and made for the grave. The soil was still loose. It hadn't yet hardened from the cold. He dug with urgency, his breath sharp in his throat. His muscles remembering a pace he hadn't needed in years. When his shovel struck the coffin lid, he hesitated, then forced it open. Cora Whiteley lay with her eyes open to the darkness above. Her skin had changed, paler, waxy. Her fingernails had dug crescent moons into her own palms where they gripped the twine that ran through the pipe. The bell cord was looped around her wrist, tightened, reddened, used. And yet she was still. No breath, no blink, no life left to save. Elias sat back on his heels, and for the first time in many years, he lowered his head and wept. The Whiteley family left town not long after. Whispers passed through church pews and shop counters. Some blamed the doctor. Others blamed Elias. They called him slow, old, useless. The parish ended his stipend. The priest said the practice had become morbid. People were too afraid of death. It was unchristian to linger. But Elias kept his post. He fixed the fence, walked the stones, lit his lantern each evening and watched. No more bells moved that spring, or that summer. Then, late one September night, a local boy on a dare crept past the cemetery gate. He planned to spy on the old man in the shack, wanted to catch him talking to the graves or sleeping with his eyes open. Instead, he found the door ajar. The lantern was burning low and Elias was sitting at his desk, perfectly still and quiet, head bowed over his logbook. The boy ran for help. The undertaker came, then the priest, then the sheriff. They found Elias just as the boy said, passed on sometime during the night, peacefully. In his lap sat the logbook, open to a fresh page. His final entry was short. Grave 47, movement. Grave 58, cord drawn once. Grave 58 opened, no occupant. Conclusion: someone is using the cords from below. They buried Elias the next morning. Out of guilt, perhaps, or long-buried respect, they gave him what he never asked for, a savior bell of his own. The cord was tied with care, the pipe installed properly, the bell mounted with fresh iron. It stood watch motionless for months. Then on a windless evening the following spring, the church sexton, locking the gate, thought he saw something out of place. A slight tilt in the bell above Elias's grave, as if someone had tugged gently at the cord. He fixed the tilt on the bell and tested the cord. Everything functioned well, as it should.
That last tale about the safety coffins makes me grateful for the certainty of modern times, though it does make you wonder what other fears from the past still linger in the dark. Which story stayed with you tonight? Did one help you drift away from the stress of the day, or perhaps send a little chill down your spine? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to like and subscribe. It truly lets us know to keep adding episodes to the channel. I'm your host, Bastion Crow. Until we meet again, keep your eyes open and your lights low.